Rosemary, welcome back for part two of our conversation about shift.
Thank
And
you. Yay. Happy to be here.
so good to see you always, always, always. So in our first shift conversation, we talked afterwards, of course. And during the conversation, you said, I saw you taking notes about something. And then you lifted your head and you said, I've just had a shift after the shift.
Yeah.
So please share with everyone what that was about.
It's interesting. It's not just the name of your podcast, it's the process that happens. And having a couple weeks to contemplate, just the questions you asked, having to come up, because this isn't scripted, but having to come up with answers on the spot, it somehow moved me forward from knowing I wanted to go in a certain direction to getting clarity on what exactly that direction was. So, it was, I went from having many sort of disconnected thoughts to having a coherent thought, if that makes sense.
Well, I'd love to know what the coherent thought is and maybe some of the other thoughts that needed to be connected.
Well,
Whatever you're comfortable sharing, of course.
yeah, I'm curious about what will happen today because, I just sat down half an hour before we started this call and did a little bit of prep. And in my in my preparing for the second shift interview, I had another shift. And again, it was like a coalescing, everything came together and I not only saw the complete concept, but where it came from, and how it linked to my past, to my purpose, and the how can I say this? And how I want to bring my gifts to the world, for the highest benefit of everyone that I touch and encounter, and maybe even some that I don't.
Yes, the unknown, the
Yeah.
unknown.
Or the people who know the people that I impact, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that circle.
Yeah.
That circle that is yet to be revealed, perhaps. And we'll get back to the process and the coherent perspective that you came to. But I think what you're saying is just a perfect example of really the coaching process that, as you know, I've been involved in coaching for 20 years. And number one, the quality of the questions is really important. But also, we often say it's what happens between the coaching meetings that is the real coaching.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that. I
Good.
think a lot happened in our conversation because, as you know, I'm trained as a coach, different school to where you went, but I've worked with a lot of coaches over time, and I think, because we've known each other for 20 years now, there is, we trust each other. There's a certain amount of safety in the space between us, and non-judgment, acceptance coming from you, I feel totally comfortable saying whatever wants to be said. And I know you will hear me. It's not like it's not like you just listen to everything without comment. Your analytical brain jumps in and you ask really keen questions, which are probably also combined with your heart and gut wisdom.
Mhm.
But I think I'm going to just put the qualifier on there is that there's something very unique and very shifting that happens when I work with you. That isn't like a typically, you can't just go on Google, look up a local coach or coach in your country and expect to get the same kind of effect as what I'm describing here.
Wow. Well, that's something you've never communicated to me and something we've never talked about. And I'm really, wow, rather touched. And again, the clarity, your ability to articulate that so clearly is part of the gift of you. And I must add that we challenge each other sometimes. And it's not always rainbows and roses in our conversations. So I think that's cool too, that we've navigated a couple of those times as well, and come back to mutual respect and mutual trust. So we're having a kumbaya moment here, which is
Well, we are, and I just, whoever's watching, listening to this, I don't want them to expect from any coach what you deliver. Because it's not fair to whoever they encounter, because it's your genius combined with your training, combined with your experience. So, every coach is very unique, and anyone listening who, wants to seek out a coach other than you, for whatever purpose, it's worth a little bit of research and definitely a conversation or two to make sure you've found a person you can feel really safe with.
wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Rosemary. That really, really means a lot. It really does. So thank you.
You're
Now back
welcome.
Now back to you, which is what coaches do, right?
Yeah,
We
for
put the
sure.
spotlight on the other person.
Great profession
So
for an introvert, because it's always back to the other person.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a true introvert for sure. So tell me more about the shift that happened after our call and continues to happen with you. I know, because you're in a very exciting
Mhm.
part of your journey, and I'm just so excited for you. So let's hear more from Rosemary.
Okay, well, what came clear in our last conversation, or what became clear to me that had been, jagged thoughts, random thoughts. I call it, sometimes think of, my brain as a whiteboard with random post-it notes stuck all over it, each of which is a, independent thought, and trying to make these go together cohesively. It's a, sort of a 3 a.m. in the morning, many nights in a row kind of exercise. And I was just delighted when they coalesced. I knew I wanted to pivot my business, which, as you know, sort of began back 20 years ago, a little longer, if I'm honest, where I came out of the corporate world and I saw so many people that had worked as colleagues who were doing jobs that they could do, they were competent, but their genius was different. What they were really brilliant at was different. And I think I cited the example of my direct marketing manager, who was a natural comedian. And it was dangerous to go in his office, because you knew that your ribs were going to ache a few minutes later by the time you got yourself out of there, if you could still walk out of there. And
Mhm.
his daily tasks were, lists and entering data, for putting together segmented lists to mail out direct marketing promotions. And he was good at that, but his real genius was elsewhere. So when I left the corporate world after having met lots of people like Steve, I thought, I work in marketing, branding. That's my background. Built brands for some of the world's biggest companies. And it's like, why can't people understand themselves as well as, say, the P&G marketing team understands the benefits and demand for Tide laundry detergent? Why
Mm.
is it so difficult for us to see our genius? So I launched my business, and my first niche was authentic personal branding, helping people understand who they really were. And I'm going to shortcut and then loop back, if that's okay, to answer your question without a long monologue. So the shift I had in our last conversation helped me see how my newest business purpose was actually enabling me to fulfill my genius
Mm.
and my life purpose, which are linked. Um, and all of that, and I did a little research, because it was a concept, but it was a little amorphous still. It wasn't quite like, I had the concept, but the how to roll out the concept was not in sight. It was like, okay, this is the headline, but the body copy was missing.
Mhm.
That's what showed up today. But if I track it back, the connection to my life purpose and my genius, like, I've always been really curious about what made people tick. And that it probably came from being an adopted child. I was adopted at 3 weeks old.
Mm.
And I've shared a little bit of my life story with you. And, growing up all over the world, my dad got transferred for work. No, he wasn't with the military, he was with Ford Motor Company. But we got transferred. I grew up in Australia, fit in perfectly, had lots of friends, loved life there. But my mom didn't. So we came back to Canada. Did not fit in Canada.
Mm.
Worked really hard and got myself a scholarship to art college in South Africa. Fit in beautifully in South Africa. And it was really interesting. Like they loved me there. I had friends, be invited everywhere. Came back to Canada to go to university after art college, and it's the same old thing as when I came back from Australia. It's like
Mm.
nobody thought I was anything special. So it's
And yet you were not different, really.
no, I was the
You
same.
were, Rosemary was Rosemary,
Yeah.
and yet
So
the culture made the difference.
why does she fit here but not
Yeah.
and here but not here? It was just
Mhm.
so strange. So I've always been a little bit fascinated about, what makes people fit in, and yeah, and what makes other people respond to them in the way they do.
Mhm.
Well, my
Mhm.
recent studies have explained that very well. So I've done a deep dive into, I've got a degree in psychology, did a deep dive into some psychological training, various approaches. My deepest dive was compassionate inquiry, Gabor Mate's approach. Also looked at uh, internal family systems. Like I've been doing a deep dive through all these, and simultaneously with that deep dive, I've been looking at astrology. I've been looking at Ayurveda, all the different branches of it, medicinal, health, everything that it covers, which is vast. And I'm really only scratching the surface.
As well as compassionate inquiry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So
Well, what I think is interesting is that I've known you long enough to know that MIBOSO has pretty much been your brand from the beginning,
yeah,
and yet that name has stayed the same, but there's been a shift
yeah,
in its focus. So
yeah,
maybe you can talk a little bit about MIBOSO, if that makes sense.
yeah. It came as what we would now call a download when I was out running
Yes.
day prior to launching my business back in 2000. And
So explain to people download. I think I know what you're saying, but
it just landed in my mind. And
yes,
because,
yes.
because I was out for a run, I had to, like, I knew it was important. I had to make sure it stayed in my mind until
Hmm.
when I could write it down. And
Hmm.
I call it MIBOSO, but that's
Oh, okay.
doesn't matter how you pronounce it. And what it is,
Hmm.
it's an acronym made from the first two letters of mind, body, and soul. And I haven't changed that name because, first of all, it's a registered trademark, and that took a lot to do that.
Hmm.
But also, I've always felt I was working my way there.
Hmm.
And, this latest iteration, and I'm not going to say it's my last because who knows, this latest iteration of the business, really does incorporate mind, body, and soul, because my shift that happened as I was prepping to come on the show was just connecting the dots, like the 3 years of intensive study that I've done, delving into, psychological approaches has really answered that question as to why I didn't fit in certain places and I did fit in others when I was the same person.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it all comes down to, cultural influences, societal influences, and education. All these things that happen to us as kids shape our worldview. They shape our perspectives. Coming from a very British oriented boarding school in Australia, a very elite boarding school in Australia, and being dropped in a blue collar elementary school in Windsor, which is very much a factory town.
Hmm.
Of course,
Hmm.
I didn't fit, but it
Hmm.
wasn't about me, it was about them. You know, they were not international. When I, you know, had a different accent, it was different back in, I guess it was late 60s, 70s. You know, diversity was not welcomed then the way it is now. It
No,
was
no.
feared, and it's like, you're strange. I don't want to get to know you.
Yeah, and there's also as humans, we tend not to trust people who are too different. And
Yeah,
it takes time to break down those walls of distrust.
yeah.
And so it's almost a survival technique. Oh, this person is too different, but we're getting into psychology now. And we could talk about that for hours, but it's important.
But it is true, and it is important because it's part of what I'm doing in my new business. And just to sort of wrap up that story, also, you know, when I went to South Africa, it wasn't that they loved me for me, it was during the time of apartheid. And
Mm,
anytime an outsider
mhm.
visited for an extended period, there was such a, you know, they were, South Africa was the pariah of the world. It was the late 70s, early 80s. And every time someone came from overseas, locals did their best to overcome that stigma. And, you know,
Gotcha.
out of their way to be hospitable. It's like,
Yes,
"See, we're good
yes.
people. There's
They're
not, you
not bad people. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes
know,"
sense as
and that
well.
was my misperception. You know, I made it about me, and it wasn't about me in either case.
Mm, 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 mm.
So that,
You took it personally.
yeah, I'm a highly sensitive person. I take everything personally.
Well, especially teenagers, we take everything to heart.
And
Definitely,
10-year
definitely.
old, absolutely.
Mm,
And yeah, yeah, for sure. So it's interesting. So that kind of brings me back to my latest shift, which is, you know, also gratitude for the deep dive I've done into psychology, because my my new approach, at first I was going to call it rewilding, meaning that I want
mm.
to help people take away all of the gunk, if I can use that very complex term, that society and culture lay onto us, and that we lay onto ourselves through adaptive beliefs and, you know, adaptive perceptions and worldview. Um, yeah, so rewilding is seen as something totally different, and I still don't have a name, because rewilding, I've seen everything from, you know, grown like adults running through the woods trying to be close to nature, to farming practices, and, you know, that's not what I'm doing.
Okay,
Really,
okay.
the simplest explanation is something I heard way back in my coach training or before, where Michelangelo sees David in the block of marble and removes everything that's not David. What my goal is to, you know, to really see who people are in their natural state and help them remove, you know, all of these adaptations they've made to themselves, that society's made. You know, that my colleagues back in my corporate days made. It's like, we have to get a job, we have to fit in. You know, you should train to be an accountant. It's a good job, even though you've got the heart of an artist.
Mm, mm,
You
mm,
know, just thinking of various people that I've worked with, and, you know, help people just remove all that and get to their true self. And part of what's driving this is also my delight at sort of seeing how my sole purpose has always been being fulfilled. You know, it's like a piece of art, maybe an oil painting, because oils you can layer, and it's like I keep
mm, mm,
overpainting and overpainting, and but
mhm,
not to obscure what's beneath, but to enhance it. So
mhm,
by the time my life is over, I'm going to have this beautiful piece of art, which is the reflection of my life purpose, that has all this depth and all this patina. And, you know, it's just grown to be the thing of beauty I was always meant to create by the, you know, by the time I'm finished with it. So,
mhm, mhm.
but it's,
Wow. Well, that is one of my all-time favorite quotes as well, the Michelangelo. I saw I saw the angel within,
mm,
carved until I set him free.
mm.
So, and it's funny that came up in another conversation I had with somebody yesterday. So it's making the rounds, so to speak.
Totally.
So Yeah,
It's so fascinating too. And that, like, I have been really fascinated with my studies for the past few years because as much as our culture and our society and our families lay this stuff on us, we we take over and we lay it on ourselves.
for sure.
And
Yes.
part of the, like, if you and again, my Ayurvedic studies, like, our bodies want nothing more than to keep us well. Our minds want
Mhm,
nothing more than to keep us safe. Um, our spirit wants nothing more than for us to effervesce and be part of the unity of consciousness.
mhm, mhm,
Soul moves us along the path of our life purpose. And what gets in the way and what's causing so much unhappiness, so much illness, so much addiction these days is all this stuff that I propose to help people remove, all this gunk.
mhm, mhm.
Because we form beliefs about ourselves as
Oh,
a
absolutely.
happens as we grow up, and these beliefs, we can be very self-critical.
Really? I haven't noticed.
My yogi said something very profound the other day. Not news, but it's like nobody needs to be harsher with themselves. That's like, yeah, nobody needs to be harsher with themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
And
It's,
yet,
yeah, we beat ourselves up more than anybody else.
yeah,
Where
and
our parents or whoever leaves off, we pick up the whip and
do.
we
And
start using it ourselves.
I do
Yeah.
that. And it's like our culture promotes self-discipline, make yourself do this. It's so funny. I'm at a gym that I go to. I love being active. So I go
Mhm,
to my regular gym, Orange Theory Fitness, in the morning, and there's a trainer there and they're yelling and the music's pumping and it's like, push harder, go all out. And then I wrap up every day with my Kundalini yoga practice, which is like, just breathe.
mhm, mhm,
Don't risk your health for the sake of a yoga exercise. It's
mhm, mhm.
repeatable, breathe, feel the chi. And it's like, is there
Well,
any,
it's that balance, I see that as a wonderful metaphor for MIBOSO.
yeah,
You're pushing hard with the body, but your mind can remain in that yogic state. Powerful metaphor. So I know there's exciting things going on, and you've mentioned again about your life purpose.
yeah,
And I love what you said about following it
yeah,
rather than, again, getting back to the metaphor of pushing yourself, rather than pushing some kind of purpose into being, you allow yourself to follow it. I think you said follow your soul. So, so where are you shifting now,
yeah.
Rosemary?
Well, firstly, I'm delighted that I have cleared enough of the clutter, enough of the gunk. By no means is it all gone. There's
Mm,
still more to clear, but I've cleaned enough that I can hear my heart wisdom. I can hear my gut. I can sense my soul path. And it's been a soft voice for years, and now
mm.
it's much more, and I can hear it much better. So,
So tell us about, I'm sorry to interrupt, but tell us about that hearing, because I know people are always curious about, well, how do I hear? How do
yeah.
I hear these messages or guidance or
And
whatever?
I think English doesn't have the right vocabulary. It's not
Mm,
real. Maybe it's just me. It's more of a knowing. It's
mm,
just it's a pull. It's a
mm,
pull that doesn't make rational sense if you try to
mm,
analyze it.
mhm.
And my pull, I've always loved nature. I've always, like, as you can see, I live in a jungle inside, and I'm actually moving to a jungle outside. I've always resisted winters in Canada, mainly for the fact that we're enclosed
Mm,
for 6 months of the year. We're breathing air that's put through a furnace system. It's not fresh air. Um, and so much to my surprise, I am relocating to Costa Rica in
mm,
2 months' time, so
mm,
early June. And I am just so excited about my ability there to be close to nature. And it's, again, not all sunshine and rainbows, as we said before. There will be some challenges.
mm,
There's lots of creatures there that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure I will run into some, some stuff that's surprising in not a good way. But I'm so looking forward to being able to grow vegetables all year round, clean vegetables, have fruit trees, wherever I end up, and, be so close to nature, eat from the land. The water is clear and clean, of course, nowhere in the world is untouched by pollution, but it's been very lightly touched. It's
Well, that sounds so perfect for you. It just does. I just get an image of you on the beach and, just you talked about rewilding. It's almost like unwilding and becoming more, for me, the word wild almost is too much. Whereas it's the unwilding, it's like getting back to this calm state of just being.
yeah.
So it sounds perfect, and it sounds like you're not certain, but you have a knowing. So there's beyond certainty, there's an inner knowing.
That's the thing. I always thought if I was going to go anywhere, I'd go back to South Africa. But after, like, I spent a month there last year, and I didn't know when I left that I would be making this decision. It wasn't until I'd been back in Canada for about 6 weeks that I realized I didn't fit here anymore. And that, if not now, never. So, is it something simple? Not really. I'm selling my house, I'm liquidating all of my possessions, and yet it's so exciting and it feels right. I've known too many people who go into their senior years anchored to a location they don't really love, anchored in a life they don't really love by what sits around them in their home.
So true,
Yeah,
so true. The safety and comfort, and again, that for some people that works,
yeah,
but not for Rosemary right now, as you honor your inner knowing. And I know you're somebody who seeks beauty, and I shouldn't say seek beauty, you honor beauty, and you create beauty in your art, in your you haven't even mentioned that you flipped 3 houses in the last 3 years and how quickly they've sold and what a beautiful job you've done.
thank you.
So give us one, I'm going to use your word coherent. Give us one coherent message about shifting.
I will, and if you give me 30 seconds to think of that, I'm just going to say thank you for your description of honoring art. That's what I came to.
Thank you.
Honoring beauty through art and creative expression, and that's something I'm going to be getting much more into in Costa Rica. I'm even thinking of teaching classes so people can birth their beauty through art,
Mm,
and that's
mm,
still figuring out. So, one coherent thought about shifting:
mhm,
allow it to emerge.
mm, mm, mm.
That's been the
Yes.
challenge for me, is I always want to force it. I figure if I will book an hour, I'll sit down, I'll journal, and it will show up. And being very frustrated when it doesn't. However, it
Yes.
shows up when the time is right. And I'm not sure what alchemy you have going on here, but there's something about the conversations you've had with me that, you know, just bring forth what has been resistant to showing up on my schedule in the past.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Rosemary. As you were talking, I got an image of, remember the old fashioned manual transmissions where we had to shift gears?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to be an idle.
Yeah.
And that's the emerging part, that maybe the processing part and the emerging part. And again, to trust that somehow it's going to show up. It's really interesting. I also completed an interview with a local person named Steve Foran. He's been teaching grateful leadership for about the same amount of time as you and I have been in this entrepreneurial space. And he says the same thing about this inner knowing,
Mm.
this inner knowing.
Yeah.
And, you know, tap into that.
Yeah.
Tap into that. So thank you.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome. And may I say one more thing? Just one final
Of
thing.
course.
I love your metaphor with the manual drive car. And one thought I just like to leave everyone with is when you are in a clear space and the gunk and the clutter is gone, you can drive through life just as if you were in neutral heading down a hill. Like you have all of the other gears available, you can use them whenever you want, but it can be as easy as just gliding down a slope in neutral, effortless for the car and a joy for the driver.
A beautiful way to end. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.